Shakespeare is a central theme at this year's New Zealand International Arts Festival, with 4 shows built around the bard, though the one we're looking at today isn't a production of a specific play. Billed as Shakespeare as You've Never Seen It, Frequently Asked Questions is a solo show where Auckland actor Michael Hurst explores Shakespeare kind of as a metaphor for his own life. The work's been developed by writing duo Natalie Medlock and Dan Musgrove in collaboration with Michael, who's made performing the great Shakespearean roles a bit of a personal mission over the last 20 years. Natalie and Dan have a string of past successes between them. The Toi Whakaari grads have been writing together since drama school days and took one of their shows, Blinkers and Spurs, to many festivals around the country, as well as to Melbourne. Since then, they've written several sellout shows for the Christmas season at the Basement in Auckland. In the past, Michael Hurst has directed them, but now they are helping him to come to grips with the greatest preoccupation of his life in Frequently Asked Questions. And Natalie Medlock and Dan Musgrove join us from Auckland. Welcome, how are you?
Very well, thanks.
Hello, good, thank you.
Working with Michael since 2010 to develop this sort of semi-autobiographical work. How did it happen, the collaboration?
Well, it was a strange course of events, wasn't it? It was actually after a Christmas show that we'd written called Christ Almighty, which Michael was in. And you were talking to him at the Basement, weren't you, Nat?
Yeah, the after party. And we sort of, well, I was sort of said to him, look, because I knew he wanted to do a solo show and it'd sort of been a long-awaited thing. And I said, how would you feel about me writing it and us writing it? And
he thinks he suggested it.
He thinks he suggested it. We actually had a bit of an argument about it with a few beers the other day. And I was like, right, we're leaving this one. Okay, it doesn't matter. But and then he sort of said, yeah, and how would you feel about directing it? And then Dan actually had an idea centred around the Shakespearean afterlife, like where do the characters go when they're not busy being characters in the world of their play. We sort of were jamming that out with Stamp and thinking of several actors to do it. And then one day I just came back from this walk and went, Dan, do you know what would make that idea amazing? Is if it was actually a solo show. And the one actor who could cope with that is Michael Hurst. And then we pitched it to him and he sort of began with these frequently asked questions that were pertinent to him, that kept him up late at night, and where his love of Shakespeare was born, you know, the big ones, to be or not to be, essentially. And then we sort of started improvising with him and creating material around that itch that he has and asking the major tragic heroes of Shakespeare for some answers.
And just quite organically, he sort of met the work and it became something, it changed, but... yeah, it's been a good little fusion.
It's quite hard, though, to find your way into a piece. You know you've got this brilliant idea, but how do you structure it?
Well, we sort of usually work, well, in this one we use a lot of improvisation and then pare back. We've got this forest of crazy things happening and then we sort of pare it back into it sort of has a form that we think is, the narrative's clear and it's accessible, but it starts off being quite abstract often, and certainly after the first week of devising we had Michael's father was depicted in the piece, we had a host of other sort of crazy pantomime characters, and we had the widow Twanky at one moment.
No, I hope you got rid of her.
We go here, unfortunately. There's always a shade of the Twanky in Michael, I think. But we just let like everything run out basically, and just let it flow, and then we paired it back, and we've been working on it now for it's almost 2 years that this has been slowly fermenting. So it's become a lot more crystalline.
It's hard to kill your babies, though, you know, when you've got this wonderful idea and may not fit in that play, but it's hard to
there's
be
a lot
with
of
an
plays
actor like Michael who can make these things so fantastic.
It is really incredible to watch because often you'll just come up with a small germ of a gag or something, and then he can stretch it into this 10-minute masterpiece, and you're like, wow, if only we had 4 hours and not an hour for the show, you know. So we've had to leave a few things on the wayside, but we've got the best of the best, I think. Control's
a hard thing as well, and you've got an actor with that level of experience. You're a lot younger. How does that balance work out?
Well, I credit Natalie with that. You're very good at like communicating with Michael, and I feel pretty privileged that he's let us.
He's made quite a brave decision. I think a good one in terms of.
He's put his life in your hands.
he really has, and he's aware of how sort of awaited a solo show is from him, you know, by his audiences, and the theatre industry are all sort of watching, and I think he's made a brave decision choosing us, but also it's a fusion of two. Tastes and aesthetics and sort of theatre heritage. Like he has such experience and his taste, and it mashes up against ours really nicely, I think. But in terms of control, Michael
A control freak. Look, I can say that.
Just a freak.
He's been really, and he has that self-awareness that he's made a very conscious choice to relinquish in this process, and that's been quite wonderful to watch. And he's been quite vulnerable and pretty gorgeous throughout the whole process in terms of the risks he's taking, and I think it'll pay off for him.
Yeah, you do take a lot of risks as a solo actor, and someone like him who's usually directed himself, even doing Shakespeare major roles, it's still crucial to have an outside eye.
Exactly, yes, and it was a slower process coming to trust us entirely, and we had to sort of keep proving our mettle as we did kill the babies and crystalline the script, and our instincts were, and occasionally when he went, oh, I don't know, and then it paid off for him, and he's slowly relinquished more and more and put more trust in us.
Well, it's great you had the time, because imagine if you tried to do it within
I think that's why it needed the 2 years of on and off and picking it up and putting it down, and that gestation period was important.
I'm talking to Natalie Medlock and Dan Musgrove about a show they're working on with Michael Hurst called Frequently Asked Questions, which opens on the 2nd of March, so you've got 2 more weeks.
Yes, we do. We're definitely in countdown mode now, so we've left him at the rehearsal room as we speak to you, so he'll be
fighting himself
in the midst of Macbeth or Othello or something.
So you mentioned the philosophical sort of thing, the questions that the Shakespearean actors pose all the time. What's the message? What are you trying to tell your audience?
Well, I think it's the mirror of an actor realising their own mortality and their own position in the world at the same time as these characters who come to terms with their own existence. Like, we're watching an actor exercise his character in a way, come home after a show and still be in his costume, and then he comes to terms with his surroundings, whilst at the same time he's using Hamlet's language as a way of digesting that.
Processing his own mortality and coming to, quite gallantly and bravely to terms with that, and where when what you're left with that, as is the human condition, I guess. Like, you sort of, after all the pains, and Hamlet goes through losing his Ophelia, Othello goes through losing Desdemona, Macbeth goes back out to get his head chopped off by,
But is there one of those characters, Natalie, that's more important, that carries the weight of the story?
Hamlet is the through line, and he is the one intelligent enough to cope with the psychology of it, and
he's
really
the most complex.
It.
If you think of all those characters, isn't he the most complex?
Yeah. And I think he's also closest to Hamlet, to Michael, in that Michael really does ask these questions, which is why he does the job he does, and how. So I think.
And there's a weird form of comedy coming from Hamlet as well, isn't there?
Well, the piece is extremely comedic.
I'm sure.
On many different levels.
But it's a great range, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's, obviously, Hamlet's famous for the cunning wordplay and the wit, but we also have a really sort of raunchy Macbeth and
quite base humour as well.
He's kind of a virile sort of crazy. I mean, they're kind of, I wouldn't say caricature, because they're just so Michael at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, they're really truthful, and we have Othello as well, and some cameos from some other tragic characters.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to imagine how you inject a bit of humour into Othello, because that's the problem with him. He doesn't have one.
Othello is my favourite. He's hilarious.
Is he?
He is. It's surreal to watch.
And it's brilliant to mix. Michael has such an amazing intuition with the text, and so when we have Shakespearean text involved, and then we're able to mix in the contemporary dialogue and have them sort of question themselves.
Well, that's the thing, is we've got to remember that Michael's put all of these productions on. He's already played Macbeth twice and Hamlet twice, so that at different ages, that is all present in his performance now, which is undermined with the contemporary language and.
So there's your raw material, Natalie. You've already got the...
Exactly. So I mean, half my job was done anyway.
And he knows all the scripts.
He does. Well, when we were creating it and we're sort of jamming through an idea or a question about, I'm trying to remember one example, but about like something about love and how difficult it is, and Michael's able to go, oh, that feeling, I've had that feeling, and then he goes, so is this character, and flicks through the complete works until he arrives at this piece of text, and Dan and I are just sitting there trying to make sure we get all this down so at some point we can process it and turn it into a script. But he's a wealth of knowledge.
I'm still trying to imagine how you do the flick from one character to another.
He has invented a way that is it looks like they simultaneously exist within him and then throughout the space. It's like madness. It's not. Yeah, I've not
It's
seen
not a device as such where
it's-
you're watching an actor be sort of overly tricky, which is really satisfying because
Yeah.
it's sort of and there's no the role is very much in terms of how he finds.
If
these
he sees
characters
it and believes it, then we see it.
Yeah.
Is
So
how-
when you were doing all that pruning back you mentioned earlier, what was your sort of little touchstone, if you like, when you try to decide, do we need this or is it in the way?
Well, I think once we clicked into this idea that it was an actor coming home after performing a show and not letting go of his character, everything sort of followed. And then we just trusted that when we cut some extraneous material that it still sort of existed in the piece, like inside Michael. But it hasn't been too hard, has it? We haven't come up against anything where we've argued about cutting.
No, I think it's been quite an intuitive thing because I'm always a firm believer in the fact that if you're making a solo show, it shouldn't be, and Michael was very keen that it was not, a compilation, the best of, and that it was always, there's no point in making a solo show unless it is intrinsically linked to the performer and his story and his need to tell a story.
And that's what connects with your audience.
Yes, and that's what connects the actor in terms of ownership to the text. So that was always quite a guiding light as well in terms of what needed to be cut. But yeah, it's a really tricky one. But I think because it was created so intuitively, because we really still, you can hear us grappling over what the piece is about still, because every time it's performed, we get something else out of it. Because the way we work is always we sort of follow our nose, and then we try to pare back to what we have, what we've found, with what we've uncovered in mind. So it was a very intuitive sort of journey.
What about Michael Hurst beating himself up, stage combat against yourself?
Yeah,
That's got to be the funniest thing, but really hard to choreograph.
Well, it is. He's been working. He was very, he was really into this right from the start when we decided there was going to be a fight. And
Well, he was a fencer when he was a teenager.
yeah, he's got an incredible array of skills in terms of swordsmanship and all his work because he's been director. He was on Hercules and would have done a lot of stunts there, and so he has a huge range of skills. And he's been working with Glenn Levy, who's a
Ninja.
who's actually, I think, even a ninja, like
He
a
is
real ninja.
he's actually a
ninja.
Yeah, so he's been working with a ninja, and they've created this. It's huge. I think he beats himself up in every possible
This
way
is
you
the
can.
point where you end up crying, is that you love him so much.
Yeah, exactly.
We just sit there like stunned mullets just watching it, and it just gets more and more intense.
Is
We're
it the
like,
climax, though? Is it the end of the show?
It is part of the climax that
Yeah.
these characters end up.
it's not really
battling each
anywhere else
other.
to go after that.
No.
And it's all you're really asking for is like, please beat yourself up.
Please let it stop. Let it stop.
But yeah, as if he needed another ball to juggle of playing all these characters, he now has to play them fighting each other. So,
He is in his element.
I'm not going to ask who wins.
no, well, yes, no,
I
that's what you need to
don't
find
know
out.
if anybody wins.
Michael wins.
Michael is always the winner.
Well, good luck for the second when it opens at Downstage in Wellington. I'm
Thanks
sure
a
you're
lot.
going to have a wonderful time there. And in the meantime, cut away to your heart's content.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Natalie Medlock, Dan Musgrove, and Michael Hurst's solo show, Frequently Asked Questions, Downstage Theatre, Wellington, 2nd to the 11th of March as part of the New Zealand National Arts Festival. Then off to Canberra mid-year to play the Street Theatre in mid-July, and I'm sure to get other performances as well.